Okay, shalom, everybody. So thank you for joining us on this virtual Bet Midrash where we teach the Torah in Yeshua from Israel. And today we're going to share about the Parasha Chukkat, which is one of the most mysterious parasha. I mean, not parasha, but mitzvah. It's so special and mysterious that even King Solomon couldn't, it's said that King Solomon couldn't find the solution to it or the meaning of it. And so what we will be doing, we'll be just trying to see how our Messiah is associated with the Red Heifer. And we will try to see what it means for our end time. So this is the purpose of this parasha lesson today. So if you like this video, you please like it and share it with your friend. So Numbers 19 is now the Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron saying, this is the ordinance of the law, chok. In that case, it says chukat because it's grammatically meant like this, but it's a chok. Chok is a special law, special decree, special something that speaks a lot of the Messiah. And it has no sense, logical, it's not logic. So Chukkat Torah, which the Lord has commanded, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without blemish, in which there is no defect and on which a yoke has never come. So what it states, this is the ordinance of the law, Chukkat Torah, it means like it was the entire Torah. It's like solemnal, this is the chok of the Torah. And it says even that the law of the red cow, the red heifer, would encompass the entire Torah. So we have to understand what is it about in the context of the parasha. The central theme of the parasha is about purification from death, because the red heifer was burnt and its ashes were used to purify anyone who had been in contact with the corpse in order to be allowed to enter the temple. So the presence of the Lord. And we have in this parasha the law of the red heifer. We're talking about the well of Miriam, the burning serpents, snakes, and the victory over Og and Sihon, that one more time accomplish all the victorious and the victory of our Messiah. But I cannot, of course, explain everything here. Just sign up for the Torah studies to find out how Yeshua has been here in each parasha from all eternity, as is said in John 5:46. For if you believed Moshe, which represents the Torah, you would also believe me, but because he wrote of me. So we want to know where he wrote of Yeshua, and this is what we're doing each week. But if you do not believe his writings, the Torah, how will you believe my words? Because my words are just drawn from the Torah. So I am the living Torah. So by studying the Torah, you study me. So this ordinance of Torah, Chukkat Torah, is part again from all those chukim that are incomprehensible for human understanding, and they are like divine commandments for which he alone holds the keys. And these laws must be followed by faith. It's not because we don't understand something that we don't have to believe it. We just have to be faithful. We cannot put the infinite in our limited mind. So the tradition teaches that King Solomon himself didn't know, in spite of his great wisdom, he couldn't unveil all the secrets of the red heifer. So surprisingly, which is very interesting, is that this red heifer, who had to be burned to ashes, was killed outside, slaughtered outside the camp and outside of the temple. And now, normally, all the sacrifices had to be offered inside, within the temple or the tabernacle at the time. Otherwise, they could be compared to sacrifices offered to demons in the fields, which was forbidden after the tabernacle was built. And there is a whole story in the Midrash, just reading at the end, where Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai replied to his disciple who asked him about this. And he said, the Torah speaks here of a divine decree, a commandment that contains a great secret. Do not try to penetrate it, for it is a law that God has ordained, a decree that we are not allowed to fathom. So this law is indeed a mystery which evolves around the major theme of death and life. We will see that it refers to the Messiah, the source of purity, who is, when he will be coming, he will be removed the spirit of impurity from the land at his coming. So our parasha speaks also of another theme, which is the burning snakes or serpents. This is another mystery. The serpent is the symbol of evil, but it is also the symbol of what can be transformed into good, evil transformed into good, because we know that the numerical value of Mashiach is the same of Nachash, 358. So both Mashiach and Nachash are two sides of a coin. Sorry. At the origin of the original sin, it is said that Adam and Chava ingested the venoms of the serpent because they transgressed the order of not to eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the name Chava shared the same root than the Aramaic word chivia, which means snake or serpent. So this means that she would have been seduced or bitten by the snake that instilled venom into her. And then the whole of creation has been subjected to the law of death because of that. So it must be healed in similar ways, like in homeopathy. You give something, the same little amount of the same sickness in order to be healed. So Moshe will then, in this story, set up a bronze snake, Nehushtan, will we become the symbol of the medicine today. Still, you know, the Kadusi, that is the serpent, this is coming from Moshe. It's the same parallel as with the good snake and the bad snake. The remedy is in the poison. So I'm not developing all of this. I will touch a little part of this at the end of this teaching. Then also you have the two root letters of the word Nachash and Choshech, which is darkness, are the same. So it means that the night is associated, also the fear of the night is associated to the fear of the snake. When we walk in spiritual darkness, we walk in the shadow of the snake because they are fear, and fear is the opposite of love. Love is in the presence of God, while fear is in the presence of the serpent, the snake. So because the numerical value of both Mashiach and Nachash, snake, are the same, this implies a relationship and an association, and we find it in John 3, 14, 15. And as Moshe lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. One more time, we have life and death. And the great Kabbalist Rabbi Ginsburg quotes an ancient text to say that it's written that when Messiah will come, he will kill the evil serpent. He will marry the divine princess, the bride, in order to unite with the origin of the souls of Israel and bring redemption to the whole world. This is just amazing because we know that this is exactly what is written in Revelation. So here we have a prophecy that speaks about the Messiah, which is also in an incomprehensible law. What we need to understand is that as a result of sin, death entered the world. So what is death? The Kabbalists tell us that it is the will to receive for the ego, which is total contradiction with the essence of the Creator, which is about giving and not taking. Adam and Chava disregarded God's commandment, and they took what was forbidden to satisfy their desire, their understanding, something for themselves. Even though they really wanted to be like God, I mean, to understand his mystery, but nevertheless, they took it to satisfy their own desire. And we learn in the Biblical Kabbalah course that the desire to receive for the self is the ultimate source of ritual impurity because it produces death and it produces what we call the breaking of the vessels. So the abundance of God cannot be held in broken vessels. So to come back, that's a short overview about death. So to come back to the Red Heifer, what was it used for? So I'm going to share with you a little excerpt that you have for the one who are following the yeshiva. You have this in your studies in the book of Bamidbar at the Parasha Chukkat. So the Torah teaches that the first heifer was burned by Eleazar, which was Aaron's son. After slaughtering it, he had to sprinkle his blood 7 times in the direction of the entrance to the tent. Then he lit the fire to burn totally the animal. Then there was the bunch of cedar, hyssop, and scarlet, exactly the same procedure as with the Lashon Hara, with the purification of the one who was being speaking Lashon Hara. And once consumed, the ashes were collected of this red heifer and ground into powder to be used for the purification of the people made impure by a corpse, about death. And those ashes were divided in 3 parts. One was placed in the chayil, which is the wall facing the temple's women's room, in order to keep the commandment that the ashes of the red heifer should be kept for all generations. Another was placed on the Mount of Olives for the purification of the son of Israel. And the third was distributed to the different groups of priests who used it for purification needs when they needed to enter in the temple. And when a red heifer was burnt, the great sacrificator, the Kohen Gadol, had to leave his home 7 days before the ceremony, as he did for Yom Kippur. And he prepared himself in a special room in the temple where he was sprinkled with the water of purification, prepared with the ashes kept on Mount Olive on the 3rd and 7th days. And the tradition sees the law of the red heifer as the domination of good over evil. The heifer is completely burnt and then reduced to ashes, which correspond to the destruction of the various kingdoms that came to empower to conquer Israel. They represent the force of evil that have sought to annihilate Israel throughout history. We read in Malachi 4:1-3, "For behold, the day is coming burning like an oven, and all the proud and all who practice wickedness will be stubble. And the day that is coming will burn them up, say the Lord of hosts, so as to leave them neither root nor branch. And the Son of Righteousness shall rise for you who fear my name, and healing shall be in its wings, and you shall go forth and prosper like calves to fatten. And you shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the sole of your feet in the day that I shall make, says the Lord of hosts." So this red heifer had a few requirements. She was never to have worn a yoke. She was to be slaughtered outside the camp. There was a sprinkling that was necessary. The person that had been rendered impure had to purify himself on the 3rd and on the 7th day. The 3rd day could not be passed. And there was something incredible occurring during the preparation of the ashes and its sprinkling of the impure person. The Kohen, who was pure before proceeding with the purification, became impure by purifying the person, who in turn became pure. There was an exchange. And this red heifer was also very expensive because it was very rare. Not one single dot or hair that white or black could ever exist on a red heifer. She has to be totally red. And red, we learn in biblical Kabbalah that it means judgment, din. So there's something, judgment is being burnt to ash. There's something going on there. And it was bought at the time of the temple, which found with funds from the annual donation of the half shekel for each Israelite. So in rabbinic thought, these red heifers are like a key to the era of Messiah. They are the sign that the messianic era is underway, a period during which the temple will be restored. It has to be mentioned that since the Second Temple, so for 2,000 years, there have never been found a red heifer until now. And what is the temple about? Temple is life. So we're talking here again with life and death. On one side, we have the Temple Mount. Okay, let me share with you something for the one who have not been into Israel. This is from Bible Walks. You have here, this is the Mount of Olives. You see there are a lot of olive trees. And this is a Temple Mount. You don't relate to this ugly thing here. In the middle, you have a valley. Okay, this is called the Valley of Cedron Valley, or also the Valley of Judgment, because people will be judged at the end of time there. So the whole of Israel, so there is life and death, okay? On the Temple Mount, you have life. On the Mount of Olive, you have death, because people have been all the time been buried there. This is why you have the largest cemetery on the Mount of Olive. But since even before the first temple period, people were buried on the Temple Mount, because you don't bury in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city of the great king, is the city of the presence of God. So there is no burial tombs except for all the Christians one that came and where the Jews were there, and they buried their saints in some different areas. But for the Jews, it is forbidden to bury in Jerusalem. So the Jerusalem and the Mount of the Temple Mount is life, holiness, while the Mount of Olives is about death and burying. So then something happened 2,000 years after, is that in 2 years ago, everybody was moved by the arrival of Red Heifers from Texas. How interesting that it comes from Texas, I have no idea. Could have come from Israel. But anyway, because there are a lot of cattle in America, and because of large, maybe, I don't know why the Lord chose Texas. But anyway, there were red cows coming from Texas. And on 15 September 22, 5 flawless Red Heifers arrived in Israel. They had been spotted in Texas. They were flown in from the States. And the Temple Institute, which is dedicated to the restoration of the Jewish temple, as you can know if somebody has been visiting the Temple Institute, they reported, and I'm quoting from their website, a modest ceremony was held on the unloading dock of Ben Gurion Airport's cargo terminal, where the new arrivals were welcomed and speeches were made by the incredible people who poured their heart, souls, and means into making this historic prophetic day a reality. So it's talking about prophecy here. That's right, they found perfect red heifers. And those red heifers now, that have been watched and for I don't know, 2 years or 1 year or something, and they put them in Shiloh. Shiloh, that was the place of the tabernacle, where the first red heifer, no, it was not the first, it was burnt into the desert, but I mean, that was the representation of the temple. And now until now, I couldn't check the information yet, but until now you can see and you can visit them, those red heifers. And also, when they decided to prepare them, and there is an ongoing of the burning of ashes of these red heifer. Has it been done or not? I have not been able to check again. I didn't have time. So they said that they wanted to burn it to ashes, and which means that they would be ready, those ashes, to purify anyone who would want to come and ascend the Temple Mount, or even enter the temple when it will be rebuilt. Because, you know, until today, you have a branch of Jews who do not even ascend the Temple Mount, because they say that until the Messiah comes, rebuild the temple, we have been purified by the ashes of the red heifer, we cannot ascend this place. And for the moment, there is a big klipa, which is a big husk that is right sitting on the place of the temple. So they don't go up. And some other they do. So it is just incredible, because first of all, it has been welcomed by the Jews like a prophetic sign. But on the other side, the enemies, I mean, the one who are holding on this klipa, they say that it was a provocation from Israel. And the Hamas spokesman gave this speech in the Palestinian Chronicle 100 days after the start of the war, that from October 7, that was, by the way, called by the Hamas the Al-Aqsa flood, the deluge, you know. Al-Aqsa being the great dome of the mosque on the Temple Mount. They say, they quote it like this: We look back 100 days to remember the educated, the complicit, and the incompetent among the world powers governed by the law of the jungle, reminding them of an aggression that culminated against our path, which is Al-Quds and Alaska, Jerusalem, Alaska, with the beginning of its real temporal and spatial division, and the bringing in of red heifers as the application of a detestable religious myth designed to assault the feeling of an entire nation at the heart of its Arab identity and the path of its prophet, the night journey of Muhammad, and the ascent to heaven. This story is relating of a myth that of Muhammad that would have make a dream, and then he would have been transported to the extremity of the land, which is Al-Aqsa. This is why the name of the mosque is called Al-Aqsa. And then from there, he would have put his foot on the foundation rock then in Jerusalem. Then he would have ascended and meet Jesus and Moses and receive all his prayers and everything. There's a whole story. This is, of course, this is a myth, totally. But what is interesting here is that they say that they are bringing in the red heifers as the application of a detestable religious myth designed to assault the feeling, meaning that they felt it as a threat. Why would some red heifers be felt as a threat for the Muslims? Al-Aqsa is located like a klippa, okay, on the Temple Mount, and especially the Dome of the Rock, the golden one, which is not a mosque, okay? This is indeed an attack against the temple, because in fact, the temple, they are attacking back, because the temple represents the divine presence, the truth. The Dome of the Rock, which is the golden dome, is like another klippa on the rock on which, according to Jewish tradition, the word was founded, it was created, and on which the Midrash tells us that the name of Messiah is written on the foundation rock. Just amazing what's going on there. And that the Ark of the Covenant will be hidden under this Dome of the Rock on which this golden thing is sitting, this klippa. You know, for a fruit to be ripe, first of all, is surrounded by a klippa, by a husk. Then when it falls, then the fruit is coming. So we are even more in the messianic unveiling here. Everything revolves around Messiah, who is the image of the invisible word, God in this word. So tradition teaches that there have been 9 red cows or heifers since Moshe. The first was made by Moshe, then after another until Ezra, the 8th during the temple period, and the last will be prepared by Messiah, the 10th. So we have a lot of symbols here. The 10th is referring also to the 10 sefirot of the tree of life. And the Jewish people were awaiting the reappearance of this red heifer. There have been some, but they were not totally red. And its ashes then, as the coming of the Messiah, of course, it was a sign. So its ashes will then be prepared to give eternal life and resurrection of the dead. So the red heifers arriving in Israel 2 years ago were 1 year and a half, were a sign of the return of Messiah. And the Temple Institute says purification with the red heifer reminds us that man has the potential to rise above his transitory physical existence with all its false sense of hopelessness and misery, meaning the impurity of death. So now let's see how Yeshua, a little bit, I'm just touching a little bit how he fulfilled all this. We said that this red heifer must never have worn a yoke. Yeshua wore only the light yoke of truth. And those who walk in the light of his spirit are called to wear only his yoke and not that of idolatry. Like we say, for instance, in 2 Corinthians 6, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship is there between righteousness and unrighteousness, which is in Greek, it means anomia, transgression of the Torah. Transgression of the Torah is associated with unbelievers. Or what fellowship is there between light and darkness? Darkness is associated with transgression of the Torah. Or what fellowship is there between Messiah and Belial? Same story. Or what fellowship is there between believer and unbeliever? If you don't believe in Moshe's writing, how are you going to believe my words? Or what fellowship is there between the temple of God and idols? For you are the temple of the living God. As God say, I will dwell among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people, referring to the tabernacle and the goal of the tabernacle and the temple. So this red heifer was to be slaughtered outside the camp. Remember, normally sacrifices were offered in the precinct of the temple. Here it was outside, just as Yeshua was crucified outside the temple precinct. Hebrews 13:12. Therefore also Yeshua, that he might sanctify the people by his own blood, suffered outside the gate. We'll come back on this. Sprinkling was necessary. It represented the sprinkling of Yeshua's blood. Hebrew 9. For it, the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer with which to sprinkle on those who are defiled sanctifies for the purity of the flesh. How much more will the blood of Messiah, who by the eternal Spirit offered himself to God without blemish, cleanse your conscience from dead works, that you may serve the living God. The person made unclean had to purify himself on the third and the seventh day. Those are symbols. The third day represents the resurrection, and the seventh represents the process of sanctification, like we count 7 weeks to the count of the Omer to receive the Torah. And the number 3 corresponds also to the third millennium of his first coming. He gave people on earth the opportunity to purify themselves of the impurity of sin that led to death. And the 7th corresponds to the 7th millennium, where he will come to purify the whole earth. Zechariah 13, at that time, the instruction of the Torah shall be revealed as a spring of water for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and I will forgive their sins like those being purified by the waters of sprinkling and by the ashes of the cow of the sin offering. And this shall be at that time, the Lord of hosts was spoken, that I will destroy the name of the idols of the nations. This is what we have on Temple Mount now, from the land and all the churches and everything, and there shall be no more memory of their name. Further, I will destroy the false prophets and the unclean spirit from the land. I've just been reading from the Targum here. We couldn't get past the third day. Number 19, he shall clean himself with this water on the third day, and on the 7th day he shall be clean. But if he does not clean himself on the third day, then he shall not be clean on the 7th day. Without recognition of the Messiah sacrifice, purification was not possible the third day. The process had to involve a death, and the 2 birds in the case of the leper, because I told you it was the same laws than for the leper, which also led to death. The red cow in the case of a contact with death, the offering of his life for eternal purification. Though there was also an incomprehensible phenomenon occurred when the ashes of the red cow was prepared and sprinkled on the impure person. There was like an exchange, and this transfer of impurity once again foreshadowed Yeshua, who took on the impurities of humanity's sin by becoming himself impure for a time before returning to the source of purity. And in John 20, we read that Yeshua, when he was resurrected, he was seen by Miriam, and he called her, and she turned around, and she said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni. And Yeshua said to her, do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brother and say to them, I am sending your father, my father and your father, to my God and your God. Apparently, he was still impure of death, and then he went to be purified. There was something. And this red heifer was also very expensive because it was very rare. And it was the rare and expensive currency used to redeem his people that Yeshua paid with his blood. 1 Peter 1:18, knowing that you were redeemed from your vain ways which your fathers taught you, not with corruptible things, with silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Messiah, as a lamb without blemish and without spot, foreknew before the foundation of the world, but manifested at the end of time for you, who through him believe in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope might be in God. So we are just touching a little bit of everything, and it's much, much deeper. But we understand that there is an extraordinary revelation that Israel will get when all the mystery contained in the law of the red heifer will be revealed. It will be death, resurrection from the dead. So studying the laws of the Red Heifer reveals that it is indeed a spiritual battle that has been won by the Prince of Life over death. The sin of transgressing his word, and this sin leads to death, and it is this transgression that feeds the Satan and his idolatrous kingdom. In Hebrews 2, again, we read, "Therefore, since the children were partakers of blood and flesh, he also in like manner was partaker of it, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil, and that he might deliver all who through fear of death were in all their lifetime subject to bondage. For he did not take angel by the seed of Abraham." So if we go back now to the story of the snakes in our parasha and the theme of death, we have to go back all the way to Pharaoh and with Moshe's snake, which swallowed those of the magicians. Remember? Exodus 7, then Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did as the Lord has commanded. Aaron threw down his rod before Pharaoh. It became a snake. But Pharaoh called for the wise men and the sorcerers and the magicians, and they did the same. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. So it's written, Va'ivla. Livla is swallowed. And you know, when we study the Torah, you take a word and you look where it appears in other contexts, and then you draw a conclusion. The word swallows up, Va'ivla, is the same word as in the verse of Isaiah 25:8. He annihilates death forever. Bila, same word. The Lord the Eternal wipes away the tears from all faces. He makes the reproach of his people disappear from all the earth, for the Eternal has spoken. And also in the book of Revelation, we find also that death will be swallowed. That will be the end. And the Midrash Rabbah interprets this verse in a messianic way again, and explains that when God created the world, there was no angel of death in the world. The Messiah would arise, and in his days, God would allow death to be swallowed up. As it is written, he will destroy death forever. So one more time, we're going back to the same theme. God wants to redeem us from death, which is the transgression of his word. And transgression leads to death. And we know that the ultimate redemption, as the rabbi is explaining, will be when the bodies who are corruptible will be transformed into incorruptible, as we read in 1 Corinthians 15. For this corruptible body must put on incorruption, and this mortal body must put on immortality. When this corruptible body had put on incorruption, and this mortal body had put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the power of the sin is the Torah. When you sin against the Torah, there is death. But thanks to be God who gives us victory through our Lord Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen. There's another text in the Zohar that says that the Messiah's scepter will be the tree of life, which is also the Vav letter of the four-letter Yod-Ke Vav-Ke, who is also the son and is the son of Yud-He. The two letters, the Vav is the son of the two first letters. This is in the Zohar Mishpatim. And this is what Yeshua did on the wood. He conquered death, rose 3 days later in the garden, and appeared to Miriam Migdal as the gardener like in the Garden of Eden. He came back to fix the original sin. Yeshua said to a woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for? And she thought it was the gardener. She said to him, Lord, if you have taken it away, tell me where you have put it, and I will take it. The tree of life, this is what we are going to eat in Revelation 2:7. He who has an ear, let him hear what the spirits say to the churches. To him who overcomes will I give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. So now, Yeshua was crucified in a place called Golgotha, which means, among other things, it means the skull. What is in the skull? It's also the seat of the brain, the will, or will. He was offered as an holocaust, which is a sacrifice, ola, for sins committed in the mind, in the head, which is the seat of our will, the deepest will of our inner being, which are not always in accordance with the will of the God. So Messiah is qualified to fight the power of the evil serpent. So the two questions of our studies: what does the red cow have to do with Golgotha? And what is Golgotha? So we understood, hopefully, that the red heifer is the forerunner of the coming of Messiah. But where is Golgotha? So we have to make just a very short study. But the temple, or even the tabernacle, was made up of 3 sections, and it had 2 altars. Okay, but there was an additional one. So first, the 3 compartments of the temple. We have the inner section, was located in the western part of the structure, and it was called the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKodashim. When you go and you visit the temple, the tunnel of the cattle tunnels, you go under, and then you find at 90 meters straight from the Holy of Holies. Well, this is the west side. In front of the Holy of Holies, separated by the curtain, there is one first altar, which is the altar of incense, the altar of golden incense. Then after you go, you have the holy, which is the holy place, where you have the showbread table, you have the menorah, and this is the holies, where the priest can come. And then outside, you have the third part, which is the place where you have the second altar, which is the altar of sacrifices. Then after you had another in the court in the temple, which was the court of the Gentiles. This was not part of the Holy Temple in strict sense, but it was provided for the Gentile who could assemble if they were coming to worship the God of Israel. In the time of Yeshua, there was a double arch bridge supporting a roadway which led from the eastern gate of the temple to the top of Mount Olives. So passing the Cedron Valley, or the Valley of Jehoshaphat, Judgment Valley. And this double arch bridge was built by the priest, okay, to go from the eastern gate, from the Temple Mount, to the Mount of Olives. It was built by the priest for sacerdotal purposes, and it was known as the Bridge of the Red Heifer. So in the Mishnah, we can read Para 3:6, and they would make a causeway from the Temple Mount to the Mount of Olives, arches upon arches, an arc directly above each pair, because of the grave in the depth, on which the priest would burn the cow, and the cow and all those that assist it go forth to the Mount of Olives. So it connected the single eastern wall, okay, to the court of the court of the Gentile, with the sanctified road that led to the third altar, on which was located on the Mount of Olives, on which the red heifer was burned to ashes, slaughtered and burned to ashes. And by the way, we also had this special descent from the Mount of Olives that we go now. It's not the same probably, but we go now by walking with all the pilgrims that are coming to visit. In Luke 19:37, you can read, and he drew near to Jerusalem, going down from the Mount of Olives. The whole multitude of his disciples rejoiced and began to praise God. So it was really, people would come and forth, but for the priests, they would go through the bridge. The eastern wall of the temple enclosure was made lower than the other walls surrounding the temple, in order to have a full view of the sanctuary. And I'm going to show you an image. It will be easier. Let me show you this image here, which is from the Temple Institute also. Okay, here we go. So you see, that was here. That was the third altar. And you see the priest was looking to the temple, offering it. And this is the opening of the temple, because the temple was facing east, okay? The Holy of Holies being west. This is east. This is the western area here, wall. And you can see from here, you see what he was looking. He was overlooking, and he was looking inside the sanctuary while he was offering and burning the red heifer. And in the Mishnah, also Midot 2:4, it says that all the temple walls were high, save only the eastern wall, because the high priest that burns the red heifer and stands on the top of Mount Olives should be able to look directly into the entrance of the sanctuary when the blood of the red heifer is sprinkled. So it was thus necessary for the priests performing the sacrifice of the red heifer to be east of the temple, so that he could be looking and sprinkling the blood 7 times towards the Holy of Holies. This is in the Mishnah Para again. So since the red heifer was burned to ash in this location, Olive, it followed that in fact, it represented the site of the place where the main purification ritual for the people of Israel was made. This was understood by all the Jews at the time. Temple Mount was about purifying from death, and this was located on the place where you would bury people. But that's not the end. In number 1:2, it says, take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel by their families. So it was a census, by their father's house, counting the names of every male for 20 years old and upwards. Seut Rosh Kol Edat Bnei Israel. Okay, and it says, Veshemot Kol Zachar Legulgolotam. It means counting the name of how is it saying, by the head of it. You needed to count the people by their crane, by the skull. You needed to count them by the skull, Gulgolotam. That was the place exactly where it was done. And I read one more time, reading from the Mishnah. There were 5 gates to the Temple Mount, the 2 Huldat gates, southern wall, on the south, that serve for coming in and going out. The Kipponus gate on the west, that served for coming in and going out. The Tadi gate on the north, that was not used at all. The eastern gate, on which was portrayed the palace of Shushan. Through this gate, the high priest burned the red heifer, and the heifer and all that aided him went forth to the Mount of Olives. In other passages of the Tanakh, this eastern gate is called Shar HaMifkad, which is the gate of the census, exactly what we read from Number. In Nehemiah, it says, Nehemiah 3:31, after him, Malchiah of the goldsmith worked as far as the houses of the Netinim and the traders, opposite the gate of Mifkad. Mifkad is like Mefaked, it means a captain, it means a census and everything. So this gate was associated to the Temple Mount, where people were counted by Gulgolet, by skulls, and where the red heifers were offered. So the place where the Golgotha was counted was on Mount of Olives. And Mifkad, okay, is the name of this third sacrifice, third altar of sacrifices. The first being the golden incense one, the second is the sacrifices in the courtyard. The third was on Mount of Olives. It was located outside the gate. So in Hebrew 13, it says, we have an altar whereof they have no right to eat, which serve the tabernacle. For the bodies of those beasts whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burnt without the camp outside. Wherefore Yeshua also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate, outside the gate. Let us go forth unto him without the camp, outside the camp, bearing his reproach. Hebrew 13. So that's why it was important we have been reading a lot from the book of Hebrews, because the book of Hebrews describe the sacrifice of Yeshua and all these things pertaining to the temple. And Yeshua was crucified on the place, I think it's obvious, where the red heifer was offered to purify for all the sins of everyone. And not only this, it is said there is a church that is built on Mount of Olives exactly at the place where the red heifer would have been offered. It's called Dominic Flavit. It means our Lord cried. It is said that from there, Yeshua looked at the temple and say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who are killing the prophet that have been sent to you, how many times did I want to gather you like a hen gathers a chicken, but you didn't want it. So your house will be left. So he cried there, and at this very place in Dominus Flavit, in this church, they found graves and ossuaries boxes from first century after that, our era, that there were believers gathering together at this very place, and they got buried in this place, which was obviously the place where Yeshua was crucified. But that's not the end. Golgotha, now we're going to the Zohar. Golgotha and the story of the cross and everything, they represent the tree of life, the 10 sphirot, the 10 higher dimensions that we must access to resurrect anything that has died in our lives, every domain that we have. This is what we must reach, this Golgotha, by killing the influence of the ego, that is the ultimate source of impurity, wanting to receive for ourselves. This is why Yeshua did it for us. Golgotha is the realm of the Sphirot, the higher dimension that are called the skull. I will show you. And this is how the light that we lost will be resurrected. The light that has been hidden since the beginning of the creation for the righteous, the light of Messiah, and this concerns the whole world. The Red Heifer is against Tum'ah, which is the impurity, ritual impurity because of our ego and because of sinning against the word of God. This is the antidote of the venom of the serpent. And we're going back to the burning serpent snakes in Numbers 21. It says, and the Lord sent among the people the burning serpents, and they beat the people, and those of Israel that died died a great people. And the Lord said unto Moshe, make you a burning serpent, and let him upon a pole. And Hebrew is a nes. And it shall come to pass that whoever is bitten and looked upon it shall live. And Moshe made the bronze serpent, Nachoshet, and he put it on the pole. And it happened that when a snake, Nachash, had bitten a man, and he looked at the bronze snake, Nachash, Nechoshet, he lived. So what is interesting is the word pole, nes. This word means also a banner or a miracle. Like for instance, in Psalm 64, you have given a banner, a miracle, to those who fear you to unfurl for the sake of truth. It means that Jews are waiting for the rebuilding of the temple. A lot of Christians, they don't wait because they say it's going to be the devil sitting in there. But Ephraim, who is going back to Torah, is also waiting. So we have the Jews and Ephraim waiting for the temple. And the following verse that we find, the reference to the Nes, this miracle, one more time in the verse of Isaiah 11:12, speaks about the gathering of the 12 tribes. He shall lift up a standard, a nes, miracle before the nation, which is the cross, and shall gather together the exile of Israel, which is the 10 tribes, and shall gather together the dispersed of Judah, Jacob, from the four ends of the earth. And this is referring to Matthew also. Miraculously, the Messiah will be lifted up before men and principalities, and he will gather together all the exile of Assyria and Edom, and then the temple will be rebuilt. Some say that first of all, the temple will be rebuilt, then he will gather all Israel together. Others say, first of all, he will gather them and then build the temple. We don't know exactly. But what we know is that Yeshua, which is the attribute of salvation, decided to die on Pesach, the Passover, for the liberty, for the freedom of sin in our place, and by his death to gather all the children of Israel dispatched in the word. In Micah, it says, I will gather you all together, O Jacob. I will gather the remnant of Israel. I will gather them like sheep in a fold, like a flock in its pasture. There will be a great noise of men. And in John 10:16, he says, I still have other sheep which are not of this fold. These I must bring. They will hear my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. So where was Yeshua crucified? At Golgotha. Not in the Holy Sepulchre, not in the garden tomb at Damascus Gate, which has nothing to do, but on Mount of Olives, where the offering of the Red Heifer was, and where the end times were taught to the Talmidim, to the outside, it was offered outside the camp. This is where everything happened. It is all the symbolic of it happened. Now, where was he crucified? No, but isn't important because we don't know Messiah now. We didn't receive Messiah in a physical way. We received it in a spiritual way. It's not important, but it is important to understand that everything is associated together to fulfill the prophecies. And mainly he was crucified the place where the ego need to get rid of the venom of the snake. Our will, the siege of our thoughts, by elevating our Messiah on a banner, a miracle, it is our consciousness that we are elevating. The mystery of the Heifer takes all its meaning here. I mean, partly, really, very humbly, a little part of it. By purifying ourselves, we can reach the Golgotha. And going back to the upper realms, do you know where we see this Golgotha appearing for the first time? Golgotha in Aramaic, not in the Holy Sepulchre, not in the Garden of the Tomb at Damascus Gate, but in one of the most ancient Jewish prayer of the Siddur that is still there, which is the Tikkun HaNefesh right here. And you see, this is the skull here, the upper revelation, the upper sphere, the upper rim. Skull Keter, Keter Galgalta, which is Golgotha. So Golgotha, this is here. This is not only the Mount of Olives or whatever, and it doesn't really matter, you know, it doesn't matter. What is very important is that at this place in the upper rims, this is where he intercedes for us, for his people, for you, for me, to gather his Israel and his bride, to be one with him and with him being one with the Father. So that's the beautiful story of the Red Heifer, and I hope you enjoyed it as I did. Thank you very much for listening. Please share that everybody will know that when we visit the Mount of Olives, we'll be thinking about all this beautiful sacrifice. Shalom.